Alexa, play Send Me Radio.
Welcome to Send Me Radio.
The Levites, the Ark of the Covenant, and the Tabernacle. A biblical overview. The Levites were one of the 12 tribes of Israel, descended from Levi, the third son of Jacob and Leah. Unlike the other tribes, the Levites were set apart by God for religious and priestly duties rather than receiving a specific land inheritance. Their role was crucial in maintaining Israel's spiritual life, worship practices, and the sacred objects of the tabernacle. The origin of the Levites trace their lineage to Levi, one of the sons of Jacob, also known as Israel. Genesis 29 verse 34 tells us that Levi was born as Jacob's third son. His mother, Leah, believed that by bearing him, her husband would become more attached to her. However, Levi's early history is marked by an act of vengeance. In Genesis 34 verses 25 to 31, Levi and his brother Simeon took justice into their own hands when their sister Dinah was violated by Shechem, the son of Hamor. Their violent retaliation led to a strong rebuke from their father Jacob, who later, in Genesis 49 verses 5 to 7, condemned their anger and warned that their descendants would be scattered in Israel. The Levites calling into service. Despite Levi's turbulent beginnings, his descendants were later chosen for a sacred purpose. Their calling into service came at a defining moment in Israel's history. In Exodus 32 verses 25 to 29, after the Israelites sinned by worshiping the golden calf, Moses called out, "Who is on the Lord's side?" The sons of Levi responded, standing with Moses and carrying out judgment on the idol worshippers. Because of their faithfulness, they were set apart for God's service. Numbers chapter 1 verses 47 to 54 further establishes the Levites' special role. Unlike the other tribes of Israel, the Levites were not counted in the general census, for their duty was unique. They were assigned to care for the tabernacle, the sacred dwelling place of God's presence among his people. Key roles and responsibilities of the Levites. The Levites held significant responsibilities in Israel's religious life. They served as priests, caretakers of the tabernacle, guardians of the holy objects, and teachers of the law. Their priestly role is emphasized in Numbers 3 verses 5 to 13, where God declares that the Levites will take the place of Israel's firstborn sons in serving at the tabernacle. Numbers 18 verse 6 confirms this, stating that the Levites were a gift to the priests, dedicated to the Lord for the service of the tent of meeting. Aside from priestly duties, the Levites were responsible for the maintenance and transportation of the tabernacle, as described in Numbers 8 verses 5 to 26. Before assuming their service, they underwent a special purification ceremony. They also played a crucial role as protectors of the Ark of the Covenant, which is highlighted in Deuteronomy 10 verses 8 to 9. Additionally, the Levites acted as teachers of the law. Nehemiah 8 verses 7 to 9 recounts how they assisted the priest Ezra in reading and explaining God's law to the people, ensuring that Israel remained faithful to God's commandments. The Levites and their cities. Since the Levites were not granted a territorial inheritance like the other tribes, they were given 48 cities scattered throughout Israel. Joshua 21 verse 8 explains how these cities were provided to them by the other tribes, fulfilling God's command through Moses. Among these were 6 cities of refuge, mentioned in Numbers 35 verses 1 to 8, where those accused of accidental manslaughter could find safety. The Ark of the Covenant, Israel's holiest relic at the heart of Israel's worship and religious practice, was the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred object in the nation. It was built according to the exact instructions given by God to Moses in Exodus 25 verses 10 to 22. Constructed from acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold, the ark measured approximately 3.75 feet in length, 2.25 feet in width, and 2.25 feet in height. It was topped with the mercy seat, flanked by 2 golden cherubim. Because of its holiness, it was to be carried using wooden poles, as touching it directly was forbidden. Inside the ark were 3 significant items. The first was the tablets of the 10 Commandments, given to Moses on Mount Sinai, which symbolized God's covenant with Israel. The second was Aaron's budding staff, as recorded in Numbers 17:10, which was a sign of God's chosen leadership. The third was a golden jar of manna, as mentioned in Exodus 16 verse 33, serving as a reminder of God's provision for Israel in the wilderness. The ark represented God's presence among his people. However, its final location remains a mystery. Some believe it was hidden before the Babylonian destruction of the First Temple in 586 BCE, while others speculate that it may be in Ethiopia or buried beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The Tabernacle, the portable dwelling of God before the Temple was built, Israel worshipped God at the Tabernacle, a movable sanctuary designed for their time in the wilderness. Exodus 40 verses 34 to 38 describes how, once the tabernacle was completed, the cloud of the Lord covered it, and his glory filled the tent of meeting. The tabernacle was divided into 3 sections. The outer court contained the bronze altar, where sacrifices were made, and the bronze basin, where priests washed before performing their duties. The holy place, accessible only by priests, housed the golden lampstand, which provided light, the table of showbread, which held 12 loaves representing Israel's tribes, and the altar of incense, where sacred offerings were made to God. The most sacred area, the Holy of Holies, contained the Ark of the Covenant. This inner chamber was so holy that only the high priest could enter it once a year on the Day of Atonement. As Israel transitioned from a nomadic existence to a settled nation, the tabernacle was replaced by the temple in Jerusalem, built by King Solomon around 960 BCE. Summary of the Levites, the Ark of the Covenant, and the tabernacle. The Levites were entrusted with the spiritual well-being of Israel, serving as priests, caretakers of the sacred objects, and teachers of the law. Unlike the other tribes, they had no land inheritance but were sustained by the tithes of the people. The Ark of the Covenant was the most sacred artifact in Israel's history, containing the 10 Commandments, Aaron's staff, and a jar of manna. It symbolized God's presence and divine authority among his people. Though its current location remains unknown, it remains one of the most revered objects in biblical history. The tabernacle was the portable dwelling place of God during Israel's journey in the wilderness. Its structure and sacred furnishings symbolized the holiness of God and his desire to dwell among his people. Eventually, it was replaced by the permanent temple in Jerusalem.
Thank you for listening to Send Me Radio.
Together,
For more
the
awesome
Levites,
Christian
the Ark,
content,
and the tabernacle played an essential role in shaping Israel's identity as